Hello everyone, welcome back to Sigil. My name is Kevbot, and this is the second episode in my series Building Character, where I will be going through every edition of Dungeons & Dragons and making characters in each of the editions. In the last video, we went over how to create a Dwarven Fighting Man, and if you haven't checked it out, be sure to watch it, as I will try not to repeat most of the stuff that I already said in that video, so you may miss out on some interesting details about how original Dungeons & Dragons was played in 1974. In this video, I will be creating either a magic user or cleric, and I will create the third character class in the next video. With that said, we've got a lot to cover today, so let's get right on into it. Alrighty, so we are good to go ahead and get started with creating our second character. This time we will either be creating the magic user or cleric. I'm hoping for this video we will create a magic user because clerics are kind of a midway point. They are kind of like part fighters, part magic users. So it'd be nice to do the fighter first and then the magic user and then kind of see the cleric, which is a hybrid. But we'll have to wait to see what we get for our stats. Hopefully I can make a magic user out of this one. And I did not anticipate the last video to be as long as it was. I obviously don't script these videos, so I just kind of ranted and rambled for a while. This video should be a lot shorter because I will try not to repeat myself. So with that said, if you haven't seen the first video, it's definitely worth checking out the first video because there are lots of things in that one that I won't be going into a lot of detail on this one. But there are some other things that we didn't cover in the fighter video that will be covered here. So hopefully this one's shorter, and the third video is even shorter than this one, but we'll have to wait and see. Again, on the left-hand side here, I have my PDF copy of the rules for original Dungeons & Dragons, specifically Men and Magic, which we'll be using for our character creation. And on the right-hand side here, I have the character sheet that I wrote up to keep track of our stats. So let's go ahead and get right on into it. Again, we can skip over all of this, the introduction, the scope, because we covered all this in the last video. We created fighting men last time. So again, this time we'll be creating either the magic user or the cleric. And if we do get to create a magic user, we'll talk about elves because elf will be our species. But if this video is the cleric video, then we'll be doing a human for cleric. We did the dwarven fighter last time. Yeah, we can skip over alignment because alignment we covered in the last video, and we can actually just get straight on into determining our abilities because we will need to do this to see whether we are going to be a magic user or a cleric. So let me just quickly turn my other camera on here so we can see the stats, and we will go ahead and start rolling. So we're going to roll our 3d6 in order. The in order being strength first, intelligence and wisdom, and see what we get, see if we can create a magic user. So strength won't matter for either build, but we'll see what we get for strength. And good thing it doesn't matter because we only have a 9 strength. This time I will bold these all from the start. All right, intelligence. So out of all of the rolls, this is the one that we want to be really high. If it's not high, maybe we'll do a cleric, but we'll see. Okay, 12. All right, so right off the hop there, we do have a viable build for a magic user, so that's awesome to see. But we'll do our wisdom. Maybe if wisdom's like an 18, we might do a cleric. Okay, so definitely not a cleric. Okay, so that solves that right off the top, although you probably read the title of this video, so you already knew that it was going to be a magic user, but and also, these stats are a lot closer to what you would normally roll for just rolling 3d6. The last video with the fighter, I don't think I rolled anything below a 10. So we're already seeing how the numbers can be a lot lower when you're just doing the 3d6. So those are our prime requisites. For sure, we're going to be a magic user. But let's go ahead and roll everything else, and then we'll start to fill out the sheet. So for our constitution, we have a 9. Oops, not a 6, a 9. So yeah, so this character, so far, not nearly as strong as my fighter. See how dexterous he is. another 7. We'll see. This magic user might need to be retired to the farm with these stats, but maybe they'll be charismatic and get a lot of followers. Not really. So yeah, this is looking at kind of averaging out our numbers here. We rolled very high on lots of the stats of the fighter, so it stands to reason that for our magic user here, we won't roll very high by averages. But let's see how much gold we start with. So we didn't start with a lot of gold last time as a fighter. We only had 100 gold last time. Okay, this time we actually have a lot more gold. So we have, that's an 11, which means that we start with 110. So actually it's not too much more gold, only 10 more gold than last time. But the last one that we're going to roll here is our hit points. So this is, again, one where I'm going to scroll down. So luckily with our constitution of 9, this isn't going to negatively affect our hit points. That's only if we had a 6 or less, we would -1 from each hit die. But if we go down to the magic user for the hit, so here, our magic users are going to have a little bit fewer hit points than our fighter. Remember, fighter was 1 + 1, which was 1d6 + 1. Here, for the magic user, he's just going to have a d6. And this is actually the strongest hit die that magic users will ever have in the game. Pretty quickly, it will drop down to a d4, back up to a d6 by 5th edition. But in this edition, we just get the 1d6 with no pluses or minuses. So let's see. 4. So yeah, and the hit points for our fighter was also 4 because I believe I rolled a 3 + 1. So that's actually not a bad roll there at all. I can go ahead and turn off the video. Alrighty, so we have done all of our rolling. So let's go ahead and we will name our fighter and we will see what we get. Or sorry, not name our fighter. I will name our magic user and see what we get for being a magic user and see what we get for being an elf. So this character we're going to name Caulfield. We had Kofsky last time. This time we're going to have Caulfield. And for our class, we are going to have magic user. Again, this is not a wizard because wizard would be one of the level titles. Most games today we just call the wizard. Our species is going to be elf, and elves are very weird. I can't wait to get into elves here. So before we get into what elves are, let's go ahead and look at what we get being a magic user. So top level magic users are perhaps the most powerful characters in the game, but it's a long, hard road to the top. And to begin with, they are weak. So survival is often the question, unless fighters protect the low level magic types until they have worked their way up. So this is good for us because our fighter was rolled very strong. And this is terminology that's called the linear fighter versus the quadratic wizard. Fighters start strong and they get a little bit stronger as the game goes. Wizards will start weak, and then by the end of the game, they have the power to change and shape the world. So we'll see if we can get our wizard to survive to that point. So what happens with us as a wizard? So all of the enchanted items we can use, with the exception of arms and armor, so weapons and armor. And this is what fighters were able to use. Fighters could use any magical weapons. However, they weren't able to use spell scrolls or wands. The exception here being elves, and again, elves are a little bit weird with this. Magic users can arm themselves with daggers only. So here we have a weapon restriction. We can use weapons. We can only use the dagger. However, again, in this edition, that's really not the end of the world because all weapon types do 1d6. So this does limit us. We don't have any ranged options to start off with. We can't shoot a bow and arrow. We can only use the dagger, but our 1d6 dagger will do the same amount of damage as the fighter, only the fighter adding the +1. We can manufacture items, which are listed on the chart down here, and anything magical with the amounts listed. So here it shows us that we can create spell scrolls, potions of healing, wands, done based on the amount of time, the amount of money, and then level. So we'll skip all that. So let's go down to elves. So I said that I wanted to be an elf. So what does this mean? So elves can be either fighting men or magic users. That's why I'm using an elf right now, because elves cannot be clerics. And the reason why I was a dwarf as a fighter is because dwarves could only be fighters. So elves can be either fighting men or magic users and can freely switch class whenever they choose. from adventure to adventure, but not during the course of a single game. So this is where elves right off the bat start off weird. We can be either a magic user or a fighter, and between adventures, we can change class. Now, it doesn't necessarily say what this means by between adventures. The way that I interpret this is when we say, let's say we have a home base in a city, we go off to a dungeon. Before we go off to the dungeon, we would decide whether we want to be a magic user or a fighter for that adventure. The whole time we're in that dungeon, if we chose magic user, we would be magic user. And then once we return back to our home base, we could then choose to keeping a magic user or switch to a fighter. So elves right off the bat here start very weird. Obviously, I'm just going to stick with magic user because that's the character that we're creating. But one of the, I guess, advantages is I can freely choose to switch between being a magic user or a fighter. So if my strength was higher, that might be a little bit more viable. But it does make the character sheet at least a bit stranger because we would have two different character sheets for whether we were a fighter or magic user with that prime requisite and the experience needed to level up. So they gain the benefits of both classes and can use both weaponry and spells because we can be either a fighter or a magic user. They can use magic armor. However, they may not progress beyond the 4th level fighting man and 8th level magic user. So just like how the dwarves had the limitations where they could only be a 6th level fighter, here we have limitations where we can cap off at the 4th level fighting man and the 8th level magic user. So elves are more able to note secret and hidden doors. So I can put more able to notice secret and hidden doors. Now, the phrasing on this one's interesting because with the dwarves, we can notice sloping passages. That's the thing that we can do. Here it says that we're just more able to notice secret and hidden doors. How much more able? Who knows? We also gain advantages noted in chainmail rules when fighting certain fantastic creatures. What are those advantages? Who knows? We'd have to read chainmail. So advantages against fighting certain creatures. See chainmail. So this is where Gary Gygax wrote these rules for Dungeons and Dragons with chainmail in mind, where in the fantasy supplement there would be certain bonuses that elves would have towards fighting certain monsters. They're not rewritten here, though, so I have no idea what those bonuses would be. I'd have to take out chainmail to look it up, or at least the referee would have to. So that's not great so far, especially in comparison to dwarf. But finally, we are able to speak the language of orcs, hobgoblins, and gnolls, in addition to our own elvish language and the usual tongue. So for our languages down here, we will put orc, hobgoblin, goblin, gnoll, elvish, and yeah, we'll get to languages later, but that will be affected by our intelligence with the other usual tongues. So with alignment, I'm going to make Caulfield here on the side of law. So again, these sides here, if Seth Coffey is on the side of law, Caulfield should be on the side of law as well, which means that he can also speak law or law-ish or law-ese or what have you. So even though they don't share any other languages, they still have this shared alignment language so they can go on adventures together. And again, we went into alignment a lot in the last video, so I'm just going to skip over alignment here. We determined our abilities. So yeah, there's nothing else I can get out of these. Oh, right. So for our charisma, we do have this table down here to see how many followers we get. Again, we get into more detail about followers in the other video, but I can see with my 10 charisma, this is actually the same as the fighter, where we can have a maximum of 4 hirelings and a loyalty base of 0. keep spelling hirelings wrong. It's okay. So just like our fighter, we can only have 4 hirelings. Our loyalty base is 0, but that's not the worst, actually. It's not the end of the world. Alrighty, just like the fighter, we will see what our prime requisite gives us. So our prime requisite for a magic user is intelligence. Our intelligence is 12. So with a prime requisite of 9 to 12, we have an average, so no bonus or penalty. No bonus or penalty. And this is a bonus or penalty towards experience that we earn when fighting monsters in the dungeon. Our fighter had a 5% bonus, so every creature that they fought, all the experience that they got was an extra 5%. We have no bonus or penalty to that. So this is actually going to hurt a little bit as a magic user to not have a bonus, because magic users also have the slowest scaling, where we need the most experience points to level up, and we're also weakest at the lower levels. So it's actually going to be fairly harmful that we don't get any kind of a bonus, but that's okay. We got the fighter to help to support us, and at least we don't have any kind of a minus. One thing that I also wanted to point out is just this idea. I didn't talk about this in the last video, but with rolling the 3d6, obviously all of these numbers are lower and much lower than we would expect in a 3.5, 4th, or 5th edition game of Dungeons and Dragons. But unlike in those games where we have the modifier, here there's really no benefit for having a number over 15. So when we look at our characters in, say, 5th edition, you want to start with a couple of stats, your main stats in the 15 to 16 range, quickly get those up to a 17 or 18, get those +3s, +4s. Here, the prime requisite of 15 or more has 10% earned experience. So with a 3d6, we can roll up to an 18, but it really makes no difference if we were to have rolled a 15, 16, 17, or 18 for our prime requisite. All of them would be that 10%. And then we even have like some pretty wide ranges, like this 9 to 12, well within the average of 3d6 for the average no bonus. So having these low numbers is not as harmful in original Dungeons and Dragons as it will be in later on editions, because there's not a lot of benefit to having crazy high numbers. Again, in this case, having an 18 would be functionally the same as having a 15, which is different than in the later editions. Now, in the last video, I did skip over the con and dex until the end, so I'll just put it on now. So our constitution of 9 means that we have a 60 to 90% chance of survival. So last time we had within 13-14, which is will withstand adversity. Now the 9, and again, this is different. In 5th edition, that 9 would be a -1 to our constitution, which would really hurt. Whereas here, it's not until we have a constitution of 6 or less, which is -1 from each hit die. So that's where like these numbers kind of meet more towards the middle than scale on the high and low ends. But I will put that down here. We have a 60% to 90% chance of survival. And of course, this is mainly in reference to our saving throws. So again, we don't have a great intelligence. We get no bonus. Hit points are okay. Constitution's not great. It's not super likely that Caulfield's going to survive to the next level, but maybe if he has a strong party and he gets lucky, he might survive. Our dexterity here is under 9, so we fire any missile at -1, which would suck, especially would be really bad for a fighter. But for Caulfield here, it's not going to matter because we can't shoot bows and arrows anyways. So this will also affect our where we start in combat. That's okay. He doesn't need to go first. He's not very strong at a lot of stuff. So we have our languages. Again, as an elf, we know Orc, Hobgoblin, Gnoll, Elvish, and Law. But for every intelligence factor over 10, we get to learn 2 more languages. So just to be able to speak to our Dwarven ally, we're going to pick Dwarvish. And because we can assume that we're going to encounter lots of humans, I will also put Common down here as well for our extra 2 languages with our intelligence of 12. So we'll skip over all of this now and go down into our basic equipment. So we get a little bit more gold here, and actually there's fewer stuff to spend it on because we are limited into what weapons and armor we can use. So for weapons, I'm going to put dagger, which is 3 gold because I am a magic user and magic users can use daggers. And this is actually kind of optimal because daggers are the cheapest and it's also all a 1d6. So it doesn't matter whether I have a dagger or whether I have a two-handed sword or whether I'm shooting a longbow. It's all going to be 1d6 of damage. So I don't have to worry about any ranged weapons. If I just got that covered, I don't have to worry about basically any of this stuff either, because that's pretty much out of our price range. And then same with armor. I can't wear any armor because I am a magic user, so I can skip all of the armor. So now we can look at our actual adventuring gear because we have pretty much all the weapons and armor can be covered by our fighter. So what kind of stuff do we want here? Let's go for the expensive stuff first. So first off, we'll go with 1 iron ration, again, because we're going to be going on dungeon explorations. So our iron ration is going to be 15 gold pieces, and that will cover us for our first adventure in the underground. So we got 107 minus 4 is... or 107 minus 15 is 92, I believe. Yeah, 92. And then, yeah, we've got tons of gold left over. Now, some of this gold we could save for our magical crafting, which we saw in this table up here. So if we wanted to create a spell scroll, we could for 100 gold pieces because we only cast first level spells. But instead, I'm just going to spend some more on some adventuring gear because our fighter could not get lots of good adventuring gear. So I want 50 feet of rope, which is 1 gold piece. And I want a 10-foot pole, which is a gold piece. And I want 12 iron spikes, 1 gold piece. So rope's obvious, 10-foot pole we talked about in the last video. Iron spikes can be really good for barring doors shut. A lot of original Dungeons and Dragons involves opening and closing doors. So can your party open up the door to get into the next room in the dungeon, or blocking the door? If you open the door and find a bunch of monsters, maybe you might want to bar the door. So we've got some iron spikes that can help with that. And then we will want a sack because our fighter didn't have anything to carry any of the gold with. So we can go with a large sack for 2 gold pieces. And we can even throw in a backpack here. So a leather backpack, mainly because our fighter wasn't able to get any of this stuff, for 5. We want our water skin, which is going to be 1. We want 6 torches because we otherwise can't see in the dark, for another gold piece. We could do lantern, could go flask of oil, but we got our torches, so we don't necessarily need that. We can go with a steel mirror for 5 gold pieces. Steel mirror is good for if we are fighting any Medusas or Basilisk or any creature that could turn us into stone. The steel mirror will be able to see and not turn into stone. And we can go with, let's go with some, I kind of want to save some of this other stuff for the cleric to get to make them a little bit more interesting. So the last thing that we are going to go for is, let's go with some wine. Oops. Wine for 1 gold piece. So all of this adds up to 1, 2, 3, 5, 10, 11, 12, 17, 18 gold pieces, which is 84 left. Yeah, 84 left. So yeah, we actually, there's not really much left. Like we could get more rations. We could get like more rope as well. But as a wizard, I might want to save some of this gold for crafting magical items and whatnot, especially because we are going to be very limited with our spellcasting to begin with. So let's go ahead and calculate our encumbrance. So for our encumbrance, we have the dagger. Oh, okay, dagger's here. So dagger is going to be 20 gold pieces worth of encumbrance. And then everything else is just our miscellaneous equipment because we don't have any other weapons. We don't have any kind of armor. So yeah, so our encumbrance is actually just going to be 100 GP worth. I put GP up here as well. Doesn't matter too much. So our encumbrance is only 100, which means that we have light foot movement, which is going to be 12 inches. So if we were using miniature figures on a battle map, my wizard would be able to move 12 inches because that falls under the 750 gold piece encumbrance here. So that's perfect. Now we will go down to our leveling and experience. So for our level, we are going to be a level 1 medium. Now this is again where our no bonus to experience points really hurts us as a wizard, because to get up to the second level, the seer, we need 2,500 experience points, whereas our fighter only needed 2,000. And our fighter is going to get more experience. They get 5% more experience for every creature that we face. So the fighter is going to level up much faster than we are, and is going to get stronger a lot faster than we are. Once we can get up to the status of a sorcerer, necromancer, wizard, we're going to be much more powerful than the fighter. The question is, will we be able to get there? Based on these stats, probably not. We will probably die or be retired to a farm before we get to level 2, but who knows? So let's take a look at what we get as a magic user with our stats. So we already looked at our hit die, which is just 1. Now what's interesting is at the first level, our fighting capacity or capability isn't actually too far off from the fighter. So the fighter was equal to man plus 1, which means for every attack, they get to roll the d6 and add 1. Magic users are just man, which means that we only get to roll the 1d6. So on average, obviously the fighter will do more damage than us, but we have the same amount of hit points, and it's not much more damage. Even though I only have a dagger and the fighter has a battle axe, we're still rolling that 1d6. So if the fighter rolled a 1 and added 1, that would be 2. I could roll a 6 and then do 3 times more damage than the fighter. And even for hit points, we actually have the same amount of hit points because I rolled a 3 and then added 1. Here, I just straight up rolled a 4. So at first level, the wizard is not as strong of a fighter, but it's also not like so far off from being a viable fighter, which is going to be very helpful because our spell casting is very limited. Now, as a fighter, we got no spell casting for any level. As the magic user, obviously, we are going to get spell casting. So I'm actually just going to create a new table, new line here for spells. I'm going to say 1 level 1 spell. So here is the bonus that we get as a spellcaster. We get to cast 1 level 1 spell. Now, for anyone who's played any other edition of Dungeons and Dragons, you might say, wow, that sounds very limited. And yes, it is very limited. We get 1 level 1 spell per day to cast. Now, this is a little bit balanced by the fact that the dagger does a pretty equal amount of damage, but the one kind of cool thing that we get to do is very, very, very limited. So we are going to be relying on that dagger. But what do the spells look like, at least? We'll skip over all this for now. Let's go straight into the spells. So here we have the spell tables for magic users. So we have first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth. A lot of these should look familiar. Some of them are the same spells that we had throughout all the editions. Some are different spells. Some spells you might notice are missing. Let's take a look at the level 1 spells that we get. Is there anything that you notice that's missing, or anything that you see that they all have in common? The one thing that jumps out to me is there's no damage dealing spells at first level that we can take. So when it comes to our reliance on that dagger, we are going to rely on that dagger a lot because we actually have no spell that can damage a monster. We get one spell that we can cast per day, but nothing that's going to do any damage. So instead, the spell that I'm going to prepare each day, I want to think about what spell might help us out in the dungeon, the exploration side. Now, sleep could actually help in combat. Charm person could help in or before combat. But all of these other spells that we're given are things that are going to help us exploring the dungeon. Things like protection from evil, hold portal, light, obviously, if we run out of torches, or other aspects of exploration. Detecting magic. We need detect magic if we want to know how to cast a spell or how magic items work. Read languages if we come across a language that we can't read. So those are going to be the things that we're thinking about as a wizard. Not how much damage we can do with our spells, but what other spells might aid us within dungeon exploration. So here again, we have our descriptions of spells. A lot of these are very similar to later editions of Dungeons and Dragons, but we'll notice that there is nothing in combat with the exception of maybe sleep. And sleep works in very much the same way as prior editions. But it gets even worse than that because let's take a look at our second level spells. So if we go back up to our chart here, this progression is kind of similar to later editions. At third level, we'll get our second level spells. And then at fifth level, we will get our third level spells. So we have to wait until third level to get second. And let's take a look at the second level spells. Detect invisible, levitate, phantasmal forces, locate object, invisibility, wizard lock, detect evil, ESP, continual light, and knock. So again, 10 more spells that we're given access to. We are given more spells that we can use. Nothing that does damage. So we get to 3 levels to get to our second level spells, and we still don't have any spells that can do damage. Phantasmal Forces, like Sleep, will help us in combat a little bit, but it's not going to help us in doing any damage. Even up to the third level, we're still going to be relying on our dagger. It's not until our third level spells that we get at fifth level as a magic user that we finally get spells like Fireball and Lightning Bolt, classics in Dungeons and Dragons. So we have to wait until our fifth level before we can unlock spells that start to do any kind of damage. And if we take a look at that level progression, we are going to be fifth level at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 at 20,000 experience points. So we need to somehow survive to 20,000 experience points, almost topping out with our level 6 Dwarven Fighter before we can get any spells that can do damage in combat. So this is where once we can unlock Fireball and Lightning Bolt, we're going to be doing a lot of damage, but it's going to take a lot of experience points to get there. And with no bonus to our gaining experience, that's going to be a very, very high hill to climb. So now let's go ahead and take a look at our armor class. Now, this is the big thing that is also going to hurt us as opposed to our fighter. Obviously, we benefited from not having to buy armor, but now we're going to be weaker without armor. So our armor class is going to be 9 because that is in our table here. 9 is no armor or shield. So we are going to be in a lot of trouble because level 1 creatures, this is the monster attacking table, they can hit an armor class of 9 with a roll of 10 or higher. And it gets much worse going up from there. So what this means is the weakest monster that we will ever face basically has a 50% chance of hitting us. Anything stronger than that is going to be higher and higher and higher and higher. So we might have the same amount of hit points as the fighter, but we're also much easier to hit than the fighter, which means that we might be targeted more, which means that we also might be more likely to die. Now, something that does kind of put us on par with the fighter is our 2 hit table. So our 2 hit table is actually the same numbers as they were for the fighter. So it's going to be 17 to hit an armor class of 2. So rolling 17 or higher on the d20. 16, 15, 14, 13, 12, 10, 12, 11, and 10. I know my numbers. So again, here we kind of have like a back and forth where in some areas we are much weaker than the fighter, in other areas we're the same or kind of the same. And here at level 1, we're actually the exact same as the fighter. Where if we want to hit a creature with an armor class of 2, we need to roll a 17 or higher to stab them with our dagger. Where again we look at the linear versus quadratic wizard is the progression here. So yeah, at level 1, we're all going to be the same, and levels 2 and level 3. But at level 4, the fighter goes up into this column, where it's going to be a 15 instead of a 17 and a 14 instead of a 16. For us as magic users, we go up in steps of 1 to 5, which means that these are going to be our numbers for hitting these armor classes all the way from levels 1 to 5, which means that we need to hit level 6, another level after we unlock Fireball and Lightning Bolt, before we drop down to 15, 14, 13, 12. And if you remember back to the experience chart up here, so we needed 20,000 to get to level 5. We need 35,000 to get to level 6, just to make our dagger hit a little bit harder. And by that point, we've got some other damaging spells that we can do in combat anyways. But this is where, again, that not having a bonus to our advancement is really going to hurt, because it's going to take up 6 levels, so much experience points, just to drop that down a little bit. Whereas by the time that we hit level 6, fighters can be looking into this next column here for what they're going to be using to hit. Except for our Dwarven fighter, he can't go beyond level 6, but that's okay for him. And again, similar to the fighter, we will put down our saving throw matrix here. And these are actually going to be the same numbers again at level 1 for the magic user. So our death, ray, or poison saving throw is going to be 13, which means that we have to roll a 13 or higher to save from the death, ray, or the poison. The wands is a 14. Stone is a 13. Oops. Dragon's Breath is a 16. And Staves and Spells is a 15. So generally speaking, this is also where we are weaker than a fighter. We have to roll higher on 1, 2, 3 of these saves. We have to roll higher than a fighter would. Turning to stone or saves and spells, we roll a little bit lower. So we're a little bit weaker than a fighter in this regard. But again, this is where our progression is really going to hurt us, because for fighting men, this is only levels 1 to 3, and then at level 4 to 6, they're going to be lowered. Whereas with our magic user, just like with the attack table, it's going to be 1 to 5. So we have to get to level 6 before this starts to drop. So we have a much slower level progression, and we need to wait longer for farther levels before we can start to see some of these numbers improve. So the last thing that I want to look at here a little bit is the spells and how spellcasting works in original Dungeons and Dragons, because it's not super well explained. The only thing that we really get, with the exception of the spell descriptions for how spells work, is this paragraph. This paragraph talks about this chart above, letting us know that we get the one level 1 spell. So level 1, we get 1. And it says, the number in each column opposite each applicable character indicates the number of spells of each level that can be used, brackets, remembered during any single adventure by that character. A spell used once may not be reused in the same day. So it doesn't explicitly go into spell preparation, but it kind of describes spell preparation with this. So my understanding of this, and again, this is the only paragraph that we're given, is that as a level 1 magic user, we are all prepared. We're getting ready to go out into the dungeon. I've decided, because I'm an elf, that I'm going to be a magic user on this adventure. So my understanding is that I would know all of these spells, and I get to choose one of these spells. Now, do I get to choose the spell when we are in the dungeon, or do I have to choose it before we leave for the dungeon? My understanding is that I would have to choose it at the very start of the adventure, before we go off to the dungeon, before we know what we're facing. I have to look at this level of 8 spells and decide that I want to prepare sleep or light or read magic, or whichever spell I want to prepare. I can choose from any of them, but I have to choose the one that I want to cast, and that will be the spell that I will prepare. And once I cast that spell, I no longer have access to it. Now, why this is important is at level 1, it's pretty easy, but at level 2, now I get 2 first level spells. So what I believe that that would mean, and again, it's not very clearly described, is before the adventure, I would have to choose 2 of these spells to possibly cast. So if I might choose, say, Read Magic and Light, I could then cast Read Magic once, and I could cast Light once. Or theoretically, I might be able to choose Sleep twice. So that would then allow me to cast the Sleep spell twice. So basically, what this is kind of like early Vancian magic of the idea that I'm a wizard, I'm studying, I memorize these spells in my head, and then the action of casting the spell then causes that spell to leave my head. So if I have 2 level 1 spells and I know Light and Sleep, I would have to actually prepare Light and Sleep. I wouldn't be able to alternate between the 2 of them during the session unless I'd prepared one of each of them. If I prepared 2 lights, I couldn't then go and cast Sleep. So that's my understanding of how spellcasting worked in this edition. Again, there's lots of different ways that it could work, but that is my understanding of spellcasting. So at level 1, I would be able to choose one of these spells, and I would actually choose the spell Sleep because it's a classic. So before I go on my adventure, I'm going to prepare Sleep and get to cast that spell one time in my adventure. But with that said, that is actually everything that we have for creating our magic user. We looked at the spells, we looked at our 2 hit tables, we saw how they were a little bit different than fighters. But that's going to bring us to the end of this video. Hopefully it ended up being a lot shorter than the fighter video ended up being. And in the next one, we will take a look at the cleric, and we will see how the cleric is kind of like a mid between the magic user and the fighter. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Building Character, where we made an Elven magic user in original Dungeons & Dragons in 1974. Let me know in those comments down below what you thought about creating the magic user, or how the magic user was played in original Dungeons & Dragons. In the next video, we will be creating a cleric. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Ketbot. Now get out there and cast some spells.